Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 700. February the 21st, 2019, Thursday. Thank you so much for tuning in. Alrighty, well, yeah, yesterday the video was a fail upload. So I woke up in the morning and it was a failed upload. I did start uploading the video again when I left for work and wasn't able to get it posted up until I got home. And that sometimes happens, as you know, but I think yesterday it may have been something to do with the fact that we had a little bit of an ice storm last night, in the late at night, early morning or late night. Sometime we had a bit of an ice storm, so that may have something to do with it, or it just may have been another failed upload. Happens about once every month or two. So, hate when that happens, but nothing we can do about it. We're at the mercy of Google. Alrighty, let's get right to it. Of course, today a lot of people are talking about this article written by John Solomon. He's written a bunch of good ones. And this particular article I was happy to read because it's they're beginning to come around to something I've been saying here for over a year, which is that Christopher Steele was not the author of anything. Anything. He was simply the launderer. He laundered intelligence. He was running a laundromat is what he was doing. Laundering intelligence. I'm absolutely convinced that the dossier garbage in the dossier came from a combination of past research done by Simpson and his wife of Confusion GPS, along with Nellie Orr accessing that NSA database through the FBI, doing them 702 queries and just pulling a bunch of information out, and then probably relating that over to Christopher Steele via her ham radio, which she probably had connected to a digital network. Because now, you know, people do ham radios, but they connect to digital networks. And that's just the type of thing that someone like Christopher Steele would be into. And so I think that Nellie Orr and Fusion GPS were kind of compiling their own information. They were funneling that over to Christopher Steele, who was sort of organizing it, probably got with his good buddy Baumgartner, who has some sources and has some collectors and other people, and they helped kind of dress it up. And once they dressed it up, then Steele began funneling it through apparently 2 to 3 different pipelines into the FBI. Also, he was funneling it through, along with GPS, to the media. And that's one way that the dossier was being dispersed. And of course, we had the other dossier by Cody Shearer that went through Blumenthal, that went through Jonathan Weiner, found its way to Christopher Steele. That was another dossier, the Shearer dossier. But in this article, John Solomon is now bringing up the fact that he believes, and he's considering at this point, this information, he's considering it to be another dossier. And you can certainly look at it as another dossier. We know that McCain also got the dossier. His buddy David Kramer got it from Fusion GPS, who got it from Christopher Steele. And apparently there was some differences between that and the other dossier. So there was probably 4 or 5 different versions of the dossier floating around. But the core information was consistent with all of them, meaning they were all coming from pretty much the same source. And that is this cabal of the rotten Reverend Clinton and her buddies over there at Confusion GPS. They were really the nucleus of the garbage that found its way into what's being called the Steele dossier or the Shearer dossier. Take your pick. The Nellie Orr dossier. It doesn't matter who you want to say the author is. I'm telling you that Steele wasn't the author of any dossier. It's more likely that Mr. Baumgartner would have been more likely to have been that. You know, Steele might have been pushing off on him, and then he was funneling right back to Steele. Steele was nothing more than a laundroman. He was getting the intelligence flowed into him. This fake intelligence, this garbage that's in a dossier, was being flowed into Steele so that he could repackage it, slap his name on it to give it credibility, and then he would funnel it into the various through the various pipelines. Everyone was using Christopher Steele as sort of the nexus point to flow all the garbage to him, and that way he could put it into his memos and then sign off on them, and then put his stamp on it so that they could say this is a reliable intelligence source. Oh, this is a former, British intelligence guy. So he is the one that gave it the credibility and was able to funnel it through, because the Right Reverend Clinton knew that she couldn't walk in the door and hand it to Comey. Glenn Simpson knew he couldn't directly do it, although he was using Nellie Ohr. We do know from this article, and we know from previous articles that Solomon's written and other people have written, Jeff Carlson among others, that Glenn Simpson gave a flash drive to Bruce Ohr, and he passed it on to his Mr. Pientka, his FBI handler, who passed it on to, we assume, Strzok, Page, McCabe, and those people. And then, of course, you have Nellie Ohr, which is what John Solomon talks about in this story, saying that Nellie Ohr also passed along a memory stick, as he describes it. And that also had essentially another dossier type thing going on with it. And her dossier likely included things that never appeared in the other dossiers, which is the background information research that she did on Ivanka and Don Trump Jr. So here we have about 5 different versions of the dossier. The core nucleus of all of them are basically similar. And there's probably some stuff in there that just simply was not included, that we have not seen all of these. We haven't seen all these dossiers in raw form. So we don't know what they sifted through and said, okay, we can use this, now we can't use that. Now we know that the entire BuzzFeed published one of the entire dossiers, with the exception of the final memo not being in there. So we know that was one version. But there were various versions, 4 or 5 at this point, depending on how you want to consider it. But this is the main drive of John Solomon's story, which appears in The Hill, which is that Nellie had a dossier too, and that Nellie used Fusion GPS resources to create her own dossier. Nellie gave it to her husband, Bruce, who gave it to his FBI handler, Mr. Pientka, who then passed it along to the FBI officials who were working the Trump-Russia investigation. The dossier was on a memory stick that contained Nellie's files on her own Trump-Russia research, which is being called, Solomon is describing as Nellie's dossier. And it's likely that she got this raw data because she was the person sitting there at Confusion GPS, accessing the NSA database through the FBI systems, doing those 702 about searches and is searches. And that's basically where this raw data was coming from. And it was being pumped over to Steele. He was probably giving it to his buddy Baumgartner, who speaks fluent Russian and knows a lot of Russian people, and was able to maybe do sort of like the arrangement. I guess he was like a musical producer who does an arrangement. You give him a bunch of different bits and pieces of music, and he arranges it, passes it back to Steele, and then Steele flows it through the pipeline. Multiple pipelines. This is essentially what was going on. It was a fake intelligence, a phony garbage. I don't even like to use the word intelligence, because it really wasn't intelligence. It was just a bunch of garbage dressed up as intelligence, and it was being laundered and made up to look like something that it wasn't. It was made up to look like real real information, when it never was. It never was. It was just a bunch of mishmash all thrown together using a bunch of history documents and files, probably from Glenn Simpson and his wife, because when they worked together at the Wall Street Journal, they were writing all these articles on how lobbyists are lobbying, American lobbyists lobbying for Russians in Washington. And the poster boy that they used in several of their stories was Paul Manafort. Then we had this Democratic operative, Mrs. Chalupa, who was over in the Ukraine, hooked up with the Ukrainians, and of course they really hated Trump and wanted to do everything they could to produce as much garbage on Trump as they could, because Trump was, of course, Michael Flynn was somewhat favorable to Yanukovych, who was the sworn enemy of the Ukrainian government at that time, and he was described as being a puppet of Putin. So you can see where this information was just a sort of a grab bag of a bunch of salacious garbage that was coming from multiple places, all put into sort of a package shipped over to Christopher Steele, and then he takes it and gives it to his buddy Baumgartner, most likely, because he does speak fluent Russian. He does have these people in Russia, collectors. Remember, Christopher Steele hadn't been to Russia in 25 years. He said in his own words in his deposition that he never personally spoke to any of the sources. He says that he never went to Russia. He never talked to any Russians. He never talked to any of the sources. The information was all being flowed to him, which he said was coming from collectors. Do you think Nellie was one of those collectors? I think so. And I think Mr. Baumgartner was also one of those collectors. So it'll become perfectly clear at some point that I was right more than a year ago when I said that Christopher Steele didn't write squat. Christopher Steele was nothing more than a man laundering intelligence. They needed someone whose credentials they could use to give credibility to the garbage that they were trying to pass off as intelligence. And Hillary couldn't do it. Fusion GPS couldn't do it. Perkins Coie couldn't do it. Mr. Halper couldn't do it. Mr. Downer couldn't do it. They needed someone else. And Christopher Steele was the man that they chose to launder the intelligence, to use his credentials to try to give it some credibility. That's why whenever you talk to Comey or McCabe or any of these people are Strzok, they'll always talk, oh, well, this former British intelligence official who's worked with the government for years and supplied information before and blah, 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 blowing up Christopher Steele to make us believe he was this super spy, this real credible guy. But Christopher Steele doesn't even stand behind his own work. And he recently gave a deposition where he says that he was hired to put together the dossier as essentially an insurance policy, that he didn't use that word, but essentially to make sure that if Hillary lost, they would have a way to take down Trump. Said it right there in his deposition. So John Solomon, writing in this article, is basically saying that there's now a Nellie dossier. Okay, that's cool. You can call it the Nellie dossier. You can call it whatever you want. You can say there was 3, 4, 5 dossiers. I contend that it was all, you can look at it that way, but I just look at it as there was a bunch of different sources, about 3 or 4 main sources. Of course, Fusion GPS, Nellie using the FISA database, the FBI database to the FISA 702 queries. You had Mr. Baumgartner over there, and then you had the Oconus Lures, the agent provocateurs, who were in there creating and manufacturing what they couldn't dig up anywhere else. And it was this sort of hodgepodge of garbage that they put together, which is what it was. And then what they had to do, though, was give it credibility and then pipeline it. And that's where Christopher Steele came in. That's the role he played. He was the launderer of the garbage dossier. He didn't write a word of it. He was the launderman, and he was the guy who was used to be also the salesman. He was the guy that was used to come over to the States and do interviews with media corporations to get them to believe his bullshit. It was in his dossier. Wasn't his dossier at all. Wasn't his bullshit at all. He was just a guy being paid a lot of money to do the sales job on it and to lend his credibility and his credentials to it, so it might look like it's actually a credible document when it never was. And the fact that this is all true and it's going to come out, whether it's a month from now, a year from now, when it finally does come out, that blows the entire thing up. And then what actually will get these people sent to prison, and I'm more convinced now that that is absolutely going to happen. There are going to be people now going to prison over this, because one thing that we got from Bruce Orr, if we didn't get anything else from Bruce Orr, one thing we got from Bruce Orr was that he did tell them, he did inform them that this stuff was probably garbage, that Christopher Steele was highly biased, and that he wouldn't put any stock in it at all. He had no confidence. And then we have Christopher Steele's own depositions. 2 of them. 2 depositions. Where he says, oh, I don't know if this stuff's true or not. I didn't talk to any of these people. I got it from intermediaries who got it from collectors. And the stuff just flowed into me. And I just simply, he's telling you that he wasn't the author. He's telling you he didn't go out and get this information. That it came to him. It was being pumped into him. He was the central clearinghouse for putting this stuff together, and the only reason that they needed him as a middleman was to lend his credibility to it. And the reason he was willing to do it is because that's what he was being paid to do. And my guess is that had he not produced any garbage or agreed to go along with all this, he wouldn't have got paid. And we're not sure exactly how much he was paid, but we know it was well in the six figures. This is all going to come out, and this is why these people are going to jail, because it's all going to come back to the dossier, the agent provocateurs, and these shady characters. And when all this can no longer be denied, and we're not far from that point, when this can no longer be denied, it's going to be proven that these characters, these criminals, put all this together, and the most important thing here, they knew it. They knew what they were doing. They knew the dossier was garbage. They knew it. This is their last stand, is what they're going to try to say. This is why they continue to go out and try to play this. When you see McCabe or Comey or any of these people, they continue to try to make you believe that they really believed that Trump was a Russian agent and that this information was really true. This is complete bullshit. These are FBI agents. You trying to tell me that they couldn't sniff out this thing as a piece of garbage in 15 minutes? It sounded crazy from the very beginning, just reading it, looking at it. It doesn't look like any type of an intelligence report that you'd receive from an intelligence professional. It was a bunch of garbage, and not a bit of it could be backed up or verified. And they knew it. They knew it, and they went and got 4 FISA warrants that we know of. They launched at least 4 or 5 investigations, including at least 2 or 3 directly into the president himself. Hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of unmaskings, the whole 9 yards. All these things they did it knowing that everything that they were doing was illegal, and it was all based on bullshit. Bullshit. That's why a lot of these people are going to jail. Now, there are rumors that Uncle Bob the Executioner will be completing his report next week. Isn't that interesting? How about that timing? How about that timing? Just as Barr comes in and Rodenstein's on his way out, and maybe sooner than a lot of people think, all of a sudden Uncle Bob's ready to call it quits. Very interesting. Another thing, where's Trump going to be next week? In Vietnam. You ever notice how when Uncle Bob the Executioner comes out with something major, an indictment or anything like that, it's always when Trump is out of the country doing something. Always seems that way, doesn't it? So, what's going on here? Mueller wants to quickly wrap this thing up, it appears. Just about the time that Rodenstein has to go. Who's been overseeing all this. Why? Because once Rodenstein is gone, most likely Barr would tell his new deputy AG, who's coming in to replace Rodenstein, to take it over. The day-to-day management of the Mueller probe. And at some point, he's going to get a final report. And at some point, we assume, from what we're hearing, that Barr is going to do his own investigation of these things. That's what he told Lindsey Graham. And of course, Lindsey Graham and the House Oversight Committee, Mr. Johnson, are going to be doing their own investigation into these things that occurred in 2016. So I think it's obvious that Uncle Bob realizes at this point that the game is up. He's taken it as far as he can go. There's no one left to harass. And now that Rodenstein is gone, him being the guy who was the keeper of the gate, protecting Uncle Bob knows he's got to shut it down. And he's got to put out a final report. So what's he going to do? Well, obviously he's going to write a final report that's going to say that Russia attempted to interfere in our elections. That's a no-brainer. But how far will he go as far as Trump is concerned? We know he doesn't have any hard evidence of anything of Trump colluding, which is ridiculous in the first place. But he has no evidence of that, obviously. So the only thing he could probably do is, the worst he could possibly do in this particular case, is to say, yeah, well, we still suspect that people around Trump may have been involved in these things, and Trump was just a dupe and didn't realize that he was being duped by all these people, because he's not a professional politician. He doesn't understand these things. He was a dupe and a fool. So he's guilty of being a dupe and a fool, but maybe not purposely colluding with Russia, but accidentally being brought into some sort of a collusion. And this is all going on. So maybe Uncle Bob can throw together enough bullshit to try to sell this. But I think it's going to be a very, very risky move for him. And I don't know what his relationship is with Barr, and that's what we don't know. Now, if Barr was totally straight up, Uncle Bob would not be able to pass any bullshit along, because Barr would sniff it out and then would likely take action against Mueller for putting out a false document. So Uncle Bob is, obviously going to have to do one of two things. If Barr is a deep state operative, then Mueller will likely be able to get away with tying some loose conspiracy which shows Trump involved, but not directly, being a dupe more than someone who actually participated. That would be the best he could hope for. The best he could hope for. But if Barr is the real deal, then Uncle Bob's not going to be able to run that game. In which case he's probably just going to have to go with the base charge, which is that Russia interfered in our elections, and we need to be careful about those Russians. They interfere in our elections, and some of these other people were shady, and there may be some other things going on, but we simply have exhausted all of our evidence. Not saying that Trump's 100% innocent. We just can't seem to find the evidence. Maybe Congress should continue looking into it. So that's my thinking. And again, this will come down a lot to what Barr is all about. If Barr is a straight shooter, Uncle Bob's not going to be able to drop some bullshit on us. But if Barr is just another corrupt and deep state insider, then Uncle Bob will be able to get away with pulling some sort of crap like that. But ultimately, I think that the pressure is eventually going to become too great from Trump and from millions and millions of Trump supporters who realize exactly what happened here, and they're going to demand equal justice under the law. The perps be brought to justice. And I think that that's the way it's going to go. But make no mistake about it, Uncle Bob's ending his probe because Rodenstein is going to be booted out the door. And that's his boy. That's the guy who was protecting Mueller. So now that Mueller's protection is gone, he has no choice. He has to shut it down and try to get out of there with his reputation intact without putting himself in criminal liability. It's a bit of a tightrope he's walking. So we'll have to see exactly how this all pans out, but it'll be one of those two things. I can just about assure you of that. Well, some group called the Business Advocacy Group in New York has put up a huge digital billboard in Times Square. You ought to see it if you haven't seen it. It's beautiful. Big, bold black letters on a white background. And it says 25,000 lost New York City jobs, 4 billion in lost wages, 12 billion in lost economic activity for New York. Thanks for nothing, AOC. That's right, Ocasio-Cortez. This deal with Amazon, she's done a lot of stupid things. And that's why I picked her to be the ambassador of stupid. She's done and said a lot of stupid things, but this one here might be a career ender for her. I don't know if she can live this one down. 2 years from now, whoever her opponent is just going to destroy her. I mean, I don't know who it'll be. Could be an establishment somebody. Could be somebody who's anti-establishment. I don't know. Somebody is going to be running against Cortez in 2020, and this will be issue number 1 for them. And this is a devastating blow. This is not the type of thing that you want to have your opponent to be able to use against you, and you can bet that this is going to be used against her, along with many other things. That's why I don't think she lasts very long. I think she's a flash in the pan. I think that if some opponent doesn't take full advantage of this and defeat her in 2020, the corporate Democratic establishment will make absolutely sure that someone comes in and takes care of her. Her day in the spotlight is she's one of them stars that burns really bright but burns out very quickly, and that's what I see in the future for her. Even Bill de Blasio, who's a total commie. Even Bill de Blasio, commie mayor of New York, is blaming Cortez for participating in that activity that cost him this Amazon deal. Well, we have Trump tweeting about Andy McCabe, basically saying he's a poor man's J. Edgar Hoover. A poor man's J. Edgar Hoover. Yeah, at least Hoover was smart. Corrupt as hell. Totally corrupt as hell. And he also kept dossiers on everybody in the country. But I imagine the Rotten Reverend Clinton learned a lot from J. Edgar Hoover. But McCabe is no J. Edgar Hoover, nor is Comey. At least J. Edgar Hoover was smart. He was cunning. Not how he was a brain or a brainiac or anything like that. Don't know if he could do a lot of high-end algebraic equations or something, but he was quite the character, and he had street smarts, and he was smart in that way. But McCabe and Comey, these guys are dumbasses. And they're these intellectual types that think that because of their intellectual, I guess they believe they're intellectually, wise or smart or whatever. They think everyone, that they're smarter than everybody else. That everyone else around them is basically just, most people are on this real low, sort of medium range of intelligence, but they feel that they're, smarter than everybody else. These are the type of people that Comey and McCabe are. The type that think that they're really smart and most people around them are much less smart than they are. So they can, fool people with their bullshit. And because there's an old saying, if you can't dazzle them with brilliance, baffle them with bullshit. And that's what these two guys did. But it's not going to work. It's not going to work because in these particular matters, it's not who can write the best book, go on all the left-wing news outlets or on the late-night left-wing talk shows and run a political media campaign. Because when the shit hits the fan, these things are not going to be tried in some left-wing media outlet or some late night on the Stephen Colbert show. These things will be played out in front of a grand jury, a federal grand jury, where lawyers will be present, prosecutors will be present, facts will be brought forward, witnesses will testify. And the bullshit doesn't stand up there. It'll be just the facts, ma'am. Just the facts. And that's what's going to get them. They'll be hung with their own petards, their own lies. They've dug their own graves. No question about it. Kamala Harris's father is quite upset over her Jamaican heritage pot joke. Okay, I guess. Jamaicans, I don't know. I've never been to Jamaica. I have a friend who goes to Jamaica almost every year, loves it. I don't know. Maybe a lot of people in Jamaica smoke weed. Maybe it's just folklore. I don't know. I don't care. But Kamala Harris's father cares that his daughter is out there, and no one's still squared exactly when it was that she was doing all this weed smoking. Apparently, she said during college, but during college, when she was in college, Tupac and what's his name, they were kids. So she still hasn't squared that one. She's got a lot of problems, and Kamala Harris has a lot of problems. Chief Spreading Bull Elizabeth Warren has a lot of problems, and Spartacus Cory Booker also has a lot of problems. Why? Because they're all three trying to run as the left-wing socialists for 2020, trying to do the Bernie campaign of 2016. They're trying to do it in 2020. The problem is Bernie threw his hat in the ring, and his first day in the race, just as I told you, he raised $6 million. I told you, day one, when Bernie throws his hat in the ring, he will become pretty much the front runner of people who've thrown their hat in the ring. By far, Bernie will enter the race in the 20s, 30s, somewhere in that range. The rest of these characters all have single digits. But once they see that he can raise $6 million in one day, these hacks haven't even raised probably 10% of that since that they've thrown their hat in the ring. And that's the name of the game. You got to be able to raise money. So that's why I told you that when Bernie throws his hat in the ring, that Sanders and Kamala Harris for sure, likely Cory Booker as well, they're done. It's over for them. I mean, Bernie sucks the oxygen out of the room when he comes in. He takes 30% of the party. 30, 35, maybe 40. I don't know. It's somewhere in that 30 to 40% range. And a lot of donors. And he's got that gigantic donor list. That's how he was able to raise $6 million. They don't have those gigantic donor lists. And they don't have his lists. He's building up his list so that he can sell it at some point for probably God knows how much. Tens of millions, probably $20 million. Bernie's list is probably worth $10 million easily. And he raised $6 million with it in one day. It's probably worth well over $10 million to him. He knows it. And that's what he's doing. He's building his list. So that when he gets his ass kicked again and walks away after being cheated again probably and destroyed by the Democratic National Committee, and which is what they're going to do. They're going to destroy Bernie. And once they do, he'll walk away, and everyone will think, oh, poor Bernie. Bernie will go home and start laughing hard, because the next thing he'll do is sell his donor list for about $10 to $20 million and laugh all the way to the bank. And then he'll retire, and he'll laugh about how he was able to play so many stupid liberals for years, decades. It's just amazing. You've got to be very, very stupid to get suckered by Bernie once. To get suckered by Bernie twice, you are an absolute freaking dope. So, he will be the front runner, and he will remain the front runner until, Biden is forced to throw his hat in the ring. And if he doesn't, if he will not, then they'll either turn to the rotten Reverend Clinton, and I don't think they really want to do that either. But who knows? They might try to pull something out of their butt and try to drag, Michelle Obama out there. She polls very high with Democrats. Maybe they'll run Michelle. I don't think she's eligible, but we'll see. Trump would smoke her too. Destroy her. Wouldn't even be funny. Wouldn't even be close. Trump's going to destroy all these people. And whoever they nominate, he's going to say, socialist. He's going to be running capitalism versus socialism. That's what he's going to be running in 2020. And I don't care who the Democrat opponent is, he's going to label them a socialist. Guarantee it. Well, the latest on the fearmonger, Jussie Smollett, the Chicago police are saying he's now officially a suspect in criminal investigation for filing a false police report. They're giving him one last chance to come and talk to them and explain to them again what happened. My feelings are that usually when you get that kind of an ultimatum to your lawyer, that means, what that really means is that we've sniffed out your client's bullshit and he can either come in and we can arrest him here when he gives his confession, or we can come out and do it the other way, which means a lot of media attention. People will see him perp walked, things like that. You might want to tell your client to come in and take the easy way. Either way, his ass is going to be in handcuffs by probably, I would say by Friday night at 10 p.m., probably sooner than that, he will be in handcuffs. And will be charged with filing a false report. And also because if he's found guilty of this letter thing, that's a federal crime because it went through the mail. They have surveillance video that shows the Nigerian brothers, who are of course not Nigerians, buying the red hats, the ski mask, preparing for the fake MAGA attack. And the best part of all of this, Trump is at 49% today, 5 points better than Obama at this exact same time in his presidency. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow with more TowerGate. Hopefully this video will be up early in the morning. See you guys. Bye.